D&D number 8, June Flower in Jesus' name. This is part B of chapter 1. High school junior Joseph Adams, known as JoJo by his friends and family, was the quarterback for his football team. Currently, he drove his brand new Ford F-150 carefully down the highway. He'd worked hard for 3 years to earn the money to be able to buy it by the time he hit his 16th birthday. His father had matched him dollar for dollar as a reward for the hard work and the good grades. His friends had teased him about coming from a rich and famous family and yet having to work to buy his own vehicle. But he felt much better about working for it than having it handed to him on a silver platter. Besides, he'd argued it wasn't his father who was the famous one, it was his Uncle Ricky and Aunt Brie, and to a little lesser extent, his Uncle Joey, and maybe his grandparents. His own father, Mark Adams, had been an all-star, all-American Heisman candidate quarterback, but he'd been injured and went on to study law. He was now a big-deal attorney, in line to be partner with the law firm of Lee, Baker, and Todd. JoJo's friends had reminded him, though, that his father, a six-degree black belt, had won a Keno Challenge, and that made him plenty famous. JoJo's mother had died right after he'd been born. JoJo was almost 13 when his father finally married, bringing JoJo a stepbrother whom he loved every bit as much as any real brother could. Logan and his mother, Bella Landau, had been kept prisoner by an abusive father and husband, Gordon Landau. The man had been shot and killed by Logan in order to save his mother's life. It had been a happy day when all the drama was over and Bella had come to be JoJo's mother and Logan to be his brother. As families go, a happier one would be hard to find, or a more grateful one. "Yo, Joe, you think you can drive any slower?" Logan asked from his place in the passenger seat. "The meeting is at 1. JoJo smiled over at Logan and glanced at the digital time readout. "We have time, bro. Just cruising, enjoying the ride." "I guess I don't blame you. I can't wait for my birthday in my car, though I haven't saved up as much as you did." "Well, you better get to work," JoJo laughed as they pulled into the school parking lot and swung around to the side of the gym. There were no other cars in the lot, and Logan frowned. Are you sure they changed the time to 1? I mean, obviously no one else is here." JoJo pulled out a cell phone, pulled up the text message from Coach Williams. It definitely said the time for the Saturday football meeting had been changed from 5 to 1. He showed the text to Logan. "I guess you can toss me a few before everyone gets here," Logan suggested as he opened the door and got out. JoJo nodded, got out of the truck, and poked his head into the back seat to pull out a football. He didn't look up when he heard tires screeching up behind his truck. He figured it was one of his teammates acting like a fool. He figured wrong. He straightened up, ball in hand, and drew in a sharp breath. He felt the cold metal of a gun pressed to his temple, the same time he saw Logan in a headlock, a gun pressed to his head. His brother's eyes met his, searching as if JoJo would know how to get out of the situation. Unfortunately, JoJo was as stunned as his brother. He blinked, saying the only thing that came to mind. "Stay calm, Logan." The man behind JoJo spoke. "Good advice. You're going to walk to the van and get in, and don't think about trying any of your karate crap or your little brother dies." JoJo intended to do everything the man said, so he was surprised when the guy pulled back and pistol whipped him. Confusion was a fleeting thought as he sunk into unconsciousness. It seemed only a second later when his eyes blinked open. He looked around. It appeared they were in an old convenience store. The shelves were empty, the ceiling tiles falling down. His wrists were bound by zip ties. He heard a moan and realized his brother was right next to him. "Logan, you okay?" JoJo asked. "I think my arm is broken, and I'd be better if he'd stop kicking me." JoJo scooted around to get a better view of what was taking place. He counted 4 large men, all armed, 2 by the door of the abandoned building, one standing to his right, leaning over Logan, a big smile on his face. One standing to JoJo's left. He looked up at him. "Why are you guys doing this?" "We're sending a message to your aunt." Which one?" "Dr. Keno." "Well, if you wanted to send her a message, you could have just called her, though I guess if she doesn't recognize your number, she might ignore the call." Oh, we're about to send a different kind of message, one she can't ignore. Jojo swallowed. He glanced at Logan, whose pained look on his face showed he, too, understood what was about to happen. The man standing over Logan grabbed him by the front of his shirt and lifted him to his feet. He pulled a knife and pushed the switch. Tell your aunt to stop. He touched the knife to Logan's chest. Wait, Jojo begged. Come on. He's a kid. The man laughed. And what are you? Well, I'm a little older anyway. Please. When it didn't appear they were going to listen to him, he tried a different tactic. You guys don't have any honor. It's easy to beat up on a kid, especially one whose hands are tied. Jojo gestured around. 4 big guys. Come on. I challenge you. Undo my hands and take me on. Just leave him alone. Well, it don't work that way. We go after the younger Kino, 'cause that's the one that hurts the most. Well, then you guys are all messed up. First, we aren't even Kinos. Dr. Kino is your aunt, correct? Jojo thought what he was about to say would hurt Logan, but it might save him. Yeah, she's my aunt. Logan is adopted. He's not blood related to Dr. Kino in any way. But I am. Come on, undo my hands and let's have at it. Don't listen to him. He's lying, Logan said. Shut up, the guy holding Logan shoved him back down and kicked him again. Jojo felt his ploy might be working. Are you guys scared? I don't blame you, really. No one is scared of you. Okay, I get that. That's why you came after us, to deliver the message. Easy targets. So if I'm so easy, take off these zip ties and take me on. But you won't, 'cause deep down, you're a little afraid. I'd come out on top. You Kinos think you're so high and mighty. Only because we are, Jojo prodded. You think so too, or you do what I ask. The guy standing over Jojo nodded at the one who'd been kicking Logan. Undo his hands. The 2 guys at the door turned with big smiles on their faces. Jojo was pulled to his feet. His ties were cut. He quickly tried to decide how he would start. The guy he challenged walked toward the middle of the store and motioned at Jojo. Come on, you little brat. Come get your medicine. Jojo moved forward slowly. The guy was definitely bigger than him, but probably a lot slower. They circled each other a few steps, and Jojo swept out promptly with his leg, sweeping the guy off his feet, and Jojo quickly landed on him and bashed his nose with an elbow. The guy screamed, grabbing his face. Jojo was sure the nose was broken, because that was exactly what he'd been trying to do. His next step would have been to shove it up into his brain, but the other 3 guys were on him in a second. They beat him to a pulp, and tore his shirt from his body and held him while the guy, whose nose he'd broken, came forward with a knife and cut into Jojo's chest. Jojo couldn't suppress the cry that came from his throat before he blacked out. We gotta go. Get him in the van, Broken Nose ordered. New scene. It was hilarious, Joey continued as he scooped up another bite of leftover pumpkin pie, except when he threw me across the room. Still, I've never seen Jason so out of control. It reminded me of Eric when he caught Cameron in the woods with Jeffy. You know, that not my little girl phenomena. Mark, Ricky, and Justin chuckled. Man, I wish I'd been here to see it, Ricky said, from where he stood near the kitchen counter munching on carrot and celery sticks. If only I could reenact the scene, Joey said with a laugh. He literally like morphed into the Hulk. Joey began making monster noises and the men broke into laughter. Their laughter came to an abrupt halt, though, as Jason entered the kitchen. He stopped and looked around, noticing the effort of each man to keep a smile from his face, and he rolled his eyes. Fine, laugh. He turned to Joey. But just you wait about 10 years when your little Sophia turns 12. You'll understand then. Joey frowned. Jason pointed at Mark, Joey's elder brother by 2 years. And don't you and Joey both have little girls about to arrive any day? You better be careful what you say, kiddos. Karma, you know. Daddy, Daddy, Sophia cried. Right on cue, Joey's tiny 1.5-year-old daughter came running into the kitchen. Joey stood and scooped her up into the air. Fia, Fia, he mocked back at her. Who's got you now, huh? Sophia giggled. I can fly, Daddy. Joey held her high over his head, her shrieks of pleasure warming their way into everyone's heart. He brought her down low enough to nibble on her neck just so he could make her do that belly laugh thing he loved so much. When he finally stopped, she snuggled up against him. Daddy, I want a cookie, she said. It's almost time for dinner, Joey countered. You'll have to wait until after you eat. Her chin quivered and her lips trembled as she suddenly snipped. Grandma said I could have a cookie, she wailed. He drew a deep breath. Okay, okay. Don't cry, for goodness sake. I'll get you a cookie. He grabbed a cookie off the plate on the counter and handed it to her. Her smile lit up the room. Thank you, Daddy, she said, hugging his neck, the threatening tears magically disappearing. He set her down and patted her bottom. Whatever, you little monster. Go tell all the ladies it's almost time for our meeting. The adorable child, with her mother's big blue eyes and soft dark hair, ran out of the kitchen, her feet pounding the floor as if she weighed hundreds of pounds instead of 20. Joey smiled after her, then turned back toward the others. Mark, Justin, Jason, and Ricky were all grinning at him. What? Joey asked, but then immediately realized. Isn't it time for the meeting? He asked as he moved toward the door. And all of you can kiss my butt, he added. The room burst into laughter behind him. The men made their way into the giant great room, which many people who visited said looked more like a hotel lobby than a living room. 3 extra large sofas formed a U-shaped conversation area. Other chairs from around the room and a few from the dining room had been brought in for the meeting. Uncle Mark, where's Jojo and Logan? Ricky's 15-year-old son Eric asked as they entered the room. Mark glanced at his watch. They had a football meeting. They should be here any minute. Frowning, young Eric moved toward the front window and gazed out. In the time it took for the men to move from the kitchen to the living room, their moods had changed from jovial to dead serious. The subject at hand, Jeffy's safety. Each one was hoping that all their preparations would be adequate. They looked up as the women came into the room. Shelley led the way, her warm, gentle eyes looking as if they'd just had a good cry. And Mark eyed Joey, acknowledging that they both noticed. Their mother was a beautiful woman. She wore her hair a little shorter now, her curls just past her shoulders. Sometime over the last 10 years, the golden brown had started to turn to gray. But on her, it was beautiful. She had the body of an athlete and the smile of an angel and was the most loving, compassionate woman they'd ever known. She was wringing her hands, which wasn't a great sign. Angel and Kimmy entered. And Jason smiled at his wife, blonde and tan, and the babe she'd always been. His daughter caught his eye and smiled tentatively at him, and he tried to not remember seeing her laid back over Eric's desk with his agent, Jensen Deal's mouth on hers just a few hours ago. It wasn't working. He drew a deep cleansing breath and focused instead on the fact that she could be missing or worse right now, if not for Joey and Agent Deal. The newest members of the family were next, Bella and Breeze, each holding one of little Sophia's hands. Bella and Breeze were sisters who'd married Mark and Joey, respectively. Both beauties had black hair and blue eyes, and both were 8 months pregnant, both with girls, and Sophia was Joey and Breeze's much adored and perfectly spoiled firstborn. Ricky smiled at his wife, Bree, as she entered the room, happy and amazed that he still felt mesmerized by her after all these years. They'd been married for 16 years, but he'd been in love with her closer to 25. Next to her walked his daughter, Taylor, who looked incredibly like his half-sister, Jeffy, which was only logical because Ricky's father married Bree's mother, and they had Jeffy. He being Eric's son and Bree being Shelley's daughter, of course their daughter would look like Jeffy. Lori Lee brought up the rear. She was married to Justin Lee and usually pretty quiet unless something riled her, like a threat to her family. At present, one could say she was fairly riled. Everyone was sitting and quietly chatting when Eric and Jeffy entered the room. They remained standing, Jeffy looking sad, a complete opposite to her usual demeanor, and Eric looking resolute. Jeffy put a hand to her head and moaned. You okay, sweetie? Eric asked. I'm not sure. I'm not feeling well. Something is wrong. Another vision or premonition? Maybe. Let's get this over quickly. Eric nodded. His calm voice demanded immediate silence. I want to thank everyone for rearranging their schedules, he began. There's no need to thank anyone, Ricky said quickly. We're family. We'll do what needs to be done to protect our own. Eric nodded. I appreciate that. As always, let's begin with a prayer. Shelley, will you do the honors? Shelley bowed her head and gave thanks and asked for clarity and peace of mind in Jesus' name. Thank you, sweetheart. Now, just so we're all on the same page, let me explain what I believe, as does Shelley and several others, that Jeffy's life is being threatened. We believe that the truck hitting the girls and pushing them over the bridge was not an accident. The police and Jason concur. We also believe that what happened to Kimmy on the beach earlier today was a case of mistaken identity. Kimmy and Jeffy have a similar look about them. They thought it was Jeffy out there and they tried to take her. What they had planned for her, we don't know because they were able to get away. His eyes only briefly swept Kimmy, but she felt the sting. Sighing, Jason shook his head. It's okay, Kimmy, Jeffy interjected. I would have done the same thing. Sorry, Squirt, Joey put in immediately, but it is definitely not okay. Eric raised his hand. Moving on. Again, we made a report to the police, and after they left today, they concur. We can surmise that whatever the bad guys had planned for Jeffy was not in her best interest. But why, Eric? Bree asked. Why would anyone want to hurt Jeffy? She's not done anything wrong or dabbled in anything criminal. She was doing wonderful things, things that could help so many people all over the world. Well, Jeffy wiped out an entire disease, and in doing so, wiped out an entire industry, Eric answered. So you're saying all the health workers that used to work with HIV patients are retaliating for loss of income? Well, no, I'm not saying that, but you are closer to the truth than you may understand. There are dark forces in this world, Bree, fueled by greed and the need for power. There is money behind everything. Money behind politics, money behind war, money behind things as simple as fashion and music and sports. And there is money behind medicine. Big money. He's speaking of the pharmaceutical companies, Mark said. Yes, and there's even more to it than that. Jeffy has annihilated an entire disease. More so, she promises that she now has the key to go much further. With enough research and without the red tape, she thinks she can wipe out most diseases. Because she was able to do her research in her own private laboratories and answer to no one, she was able to get done what others could not. And you're talking about government interference, Angel asked. Yes and no. Those dark forces I speak of have infiltrated pretty much every government. So when some inspector from some agency closes down a lab and writes up some false report on why it was closed, no one thinks a thing about it. Jeffy's research has been privately funded, and she does her research in labs that are located all over the world. It makes it hard to keep tabs on her, hard to oversee what she's doing. By the time she came out with a cure for AIDS, it was too late. I believe they intend to make sure she never has another breakthrough. This is crazy, Bella said. Eric nodded. Unfortunately, it's the reality of the situation. He blew out a long breath and drew another. We, Jason and I, with Joey and Ameritech's help, we were prepared to really beef up security, go to red alert, so to speak. But I've just come from a little conference with Jeffy and Shelley. We will still up security, but Jeffy has decided that her presence in our life is a danger to us all, and she wishes to remove herself from our circle for a time. What are you talking about? Joey asked, his temper flaring. You're not going anywhere, Mark said, looking fiercely at Jeffy. We're not going to send you away because we're afraid. We won't live in fear. But I will, Jeffy said quickly. I'll live in fear every moment of every day. Fear that something will happen to one of you because of me. She put her hand to her head, grimacing. Are you okay? Eric asked. Jeffy only shrugged. Well, we can take the heat, young Eric said from where he stood by the window. Eric held up his hand. I appreciate everyone's sentiment. I, too, believe that everyone must do what they must do in this world, regardless of the danger. But I also understand where Jeffy is coming from. He looked around the room at the people he loved. I, too, would be devastated if anything were to happen to any one of you, and I have no desire for Jeffy to be consumed with guilt if it did. So she will let these bad guys stop her work? Ricky asked. No, Eric answered for her. What she intends is to just bide her time for a while, play dead, for lack of a better expression. And just where do you intend to go? Jason asked. Jeffy offered a stiff smile. I believe I will seek solace and satori in the Himalayas. Then you're planning an extended stay in the Buxuro monastery in northern India? Jeffy nodded. How long? Joey demanded. I'll stay until I feel it's right for me to leave. She stepped forward. I know it sounds as if I'm running. I swear that I'm not. I'll make the bad guys think I'm done. I'll make them think that I not furthering my research, though I assure you at the monastery I will be in the thick of it in my own way. You must trust me. I feel strongly that this is for the best. Well, you're my baby sister, and I don't want you to leave, Bree said, her eyes brimming with tears. I don't see why you feel this is necessary. At that moment, the house phone rang, and Eric picked it up from the table closest to him, glancing at the readout before he answered. It was the security agent at the front gate. Yes? Sir, I think you'd better get out here, a panicked voice said. What is it? It's Jojo and Logan. It's bad, sir. A white van pulled up and dumped them out and took off. Eric looked up from the phone. Mark, Jason, Joey, come with me. The rest of you stay here. What's happened? Shelley asked. It's Jojo and Logan. Bella gasped and struggled to stand. Take care of her, Mark ordered before he, Eric, Jason, and Joey ran out the front door, jumped into a car, and raced the near mile to the front gate. The women huddled together, offering comfort to each other. Jeffy, Ricky said quickly, as the ones left in the house gathered at the window. Get your medical bag. Shelley, we'll probably need towels and blankets. Nodding, they went to gather the supplies. Outside, the front gate was open by the time the four men got there. Two security guards knelt by two bodies lying in the drive just outside the gate. They jumped from the car and couldn't believe what they were seeing. 15-year-old Logan lay on his back, semi-conscious, his arm turned at an impossible angle. He was moaning in pain. Eric knelt beside him and touched his hand to the young man's forehead. I know it hurts, Logan. Hold on, son. We're going to fix you up. Mark dropped down next to Jojo, who was face down and not moving. He looked at Jason and Joey, nodded, and they carefully turned him over. Even Jason, hardened by his years running the agency, was aghast by what he saw. Jojo's battered and bloody face was not recognizable. He wore no shirt. His chest bore diagonal slash marks as a giant X. Through tears, Mark looked closely at his son. Jojo, he whispered, can you hear me? Jojo struggled to speak. Dad? Yes, Joe, it's me. I'm here now. You're going to be okay. Do you hear? Logan, is he? He's right here, son. He's going to be okay, too. We're going to get you guys up to the house. While Jason stayed to get information from the security guards, Mark, Joey, and Eric carefully loaded the boys into the car and headed up to the house. Ricky opened the door as Eric and Joey carried Logan into the house, being careful to keep his arms stable. They laid him on one of the sofas. I think his left arm is broken, Joey told Jeffy as she immediately began to examine him. He went back out to help Mark. Little Sophia began to cry, and Bree scooped her up and took her to the kitchen. Bella, tears running down her face, dropped down on the floor by Logan's side. She turned when she heard everyone gasp as Mark and Joey carried Jojo in the door. They laid him down on another sofa and covered him, and Shelley hovering over him, kissing his forehead, whispering words of love. Jeffy quickly took in Jojo's more serious injuries and examined his eyes. He was sinking in and out of consciousness. She looked up at her mother. We're going to need to get these guys to a hospital. Shelley nodded. I've already called 911. They're on the way. Hand me those gauze sponges, she said, pointing at the first aid kit. She began pressing them against the deep cuts on Jojo's chest. He stirred and tried to rise up. Lie still, Joe, Mark ordered. Dad, listen, he implored. Two guys. They had guns. They forced us into a van. Jeffy, they said it was about you. They said You had to stop. And I told them to go to hell. Oh, Jojo, Jeffy cried. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. It's okay. It's not your fault. He fell back unconscious. Jeffy turned her head to look at Bree, tears streaming down her cheeks. Do you see now? She cried. Do you see why it's necessary that I go away? She looked at her father. Dad, will you schedule a press conference for tomorrow? Eric closed his eyes. It has begun. The man in Jeffy's dream had said. Eric had a feeling this was going to be a very hard time, but they would get through it. He would make sure they would get through it. Yes, sweetheart, I'll take care of it. Young Eric bent over the side of the sofa and pressed his forehead against Jojo's. They were cousins, born just a few months apart, but to Eric, Jojo was like a part of him. He'd been uncomfortable all afternoon. Now he knew why. Joe, young Eric said softly, you're going to be okay. Do you hear me? Jojo drew a ragged breath. I hear you, man, he mumbled. Look after Logan. Eric sniffed, unashamed of the tears in his eyes. You know I will, but just until you get better. Got it, Jojo mumbled before he sank back down into oblivion. And that is the end of chapter 1.